The city never slept, but that morning felt unusually still. Cold light slipped through the blinds of the high-rise apartment, bathing the kitchen in a pale, silver glow. Emma stood barefoot on the cold marble tiles, her heartbeat so loud she could hear it echo in her ears. In her hand, she clutched a small white stick, simple, silent, and yet impossibly loud. 2 lines. Clear, undeniable. Her knees trembled slightly as she stared down at it. 1,000 emotions crowding her chest: hope, fear, joy, and something else she couldn't name. It wasn't just about her anymore. Life had shifted. Inside her, something new had begun, and though she wasn't ready, she knew she wanted it more than anything she had ever wanted before. Her fingers tightened around the test as the front door opened with a soft click. Footsteps followed, the familiar sound of polished shoes on hardwood floors. Emma quickly tucked the test behind her back, her breath catching. She turned to face him. Nick was already halfway across the room, dressed immaculately in a crisp navy suit, adjusting the cuff of his shirt with practiced ease. His watch gleamed under the soft light, one of those limited editions he liked to collect, the kind that could pay rent for someone's entire year. But his eyes looked tired, focused on something far away. "Hey," Emma said, voice almost a whisper. He glanced up briefly. "Morning." She hesitated, watching him pour coffee, scroll through his phone, reply to an email without missing a beat. He moved like a machine, precise, detached. Once, she'd found it fascinating. Now, it just made her feel like a stranger in her own home. "I need to talk to you," she said softly. Nick didn't look up. "Can it wait? I have a board call in 15 minutes. "No," she said, stronger this time. She stepped forward and placed the test gently on the marble countertop. Between them, his eyes flicked down. The lines were visible even from where he stood. There was a pause, longer than it should have been. The world seemed to hold its breath. Emma waited for something, anything, a word, a look, a question, but there was nothing. Nick blinked once, slowly, like processing a number in a spreadsheet that didn't make sense. Then, without a word, he reached for his phone again, grabbed his suit jacket, and walked past her toward the door. Her hand shot out instinctively. "Nick," he paused with his back to her, fingers resting on the door handle. "Please, say something." But he didn't, and then he was gone. The door clicked shut, and just like that, her world felt heavier than it ever had before. Emma stood frozen in place. The ticking of the clock became the loudest thing in the room. The test still lay on the counter, as silent as before, but now it felt like a monument to everything she thought they had, and everything that was now lost. She lowered herself onto the couch, hands trembling. Her other hand moved protectively to her stomach. She had imagined this moment differently. She had hoped for disbelief, maybe shock even, followed by a smile, a hand over hers, a whispered promise. But not this, not silence, not abandonment. Tears welled up but didn't fall. She wasn't even sure she could cry. It was as if her heart had folded in on itself, too stunned to grieve properly. She had loved Nick, or at least the version of him she believed still existed under all that armor. The man who once brought her soup when she was sick. The one who stayed up all night helping her write her application essay for grad school. The man who said she made him feel like the world slowed down when she smiled. But maybe that was just a chapter that was never meant to last. The apartment, with its high ceilings and perfect symmetry, suddenly felt too large, too empty. She had always felt like a guest in Nick's world, but now she felt like a ghost in her own story. Still, something inside her, quiet but powerful, refused to break. She wasn't sure what lay ahead, but she knew this. She would not let this baby feel unwanted. She wouldn't let silence be the beginning of her child's story. The hours passed slowly that day. Emma didn't call anyone. She didn't tell her best friend, didn't reach out to her mother. It felt too fragile, too raw, like speaking it aloud would make it real in a way she wasn't ready for. When night fell, and city lights blinked through the glass like distant stars, she sat at the edge of her bed, holding a small journal in her hands. She opened to the first page and began to write, not to herself, but to the life growing inside her. "I don't know who you'll be, but I promise you this: you are loved. Not because someone else said so, not because it's easy, but because From the moment I saw those 2 lines, I knew. You are already the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I will protect you with everything I have." She closed the journal, held it against her chest, and let the tears come quiet, soft, and free. Nick didn't call the next day, or the next week, but life, as it always does, moved forward. Emma found strength in small things: morning walks, the sound of her baby's heartbeat during her first appointment, the kindness of strangers, and the fierce, blooming love she never knew was possible. She learned to breathe without him, to laugh again, to dream differently. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have guessed, was that for years later, Nick would find that same journal again, and it would change everything. But that part of the story was still waiting for now. A single mother sat in silence, not broken, just beginning. For years had passed. The seasons had come and gone, each one carving its story into Emma's world. Like wind shaping stone, the apartment was no longer hers. That chapter had closed long ago. Now, she lived in a modest home with creaky floors, mismatched furniture, and warmth in every corner. A home built not with money, but with laughter, lullabies, and love. Her daughter, Lily, was almost 4 now, bright-eyed, curious, always asking questions that made Emma both smile and think deeply. She had Nick's sharp cheekbones, but Emma's gentle eyes. Sometimes, Emma would catch Lily staring out the window in a quiet, reflective way that didn't quite match her age, like she was waiting for something or someone. Emma never told her about Nick, not really. There was no hatred in her voice when she spoke of the past, just a calm silence, a space where explanations didn't live yet. One day, she would tell Lily the truth, but not now, not when the world was still so new to her, so filled with wonder and magic. Emma had found work at a small art studio on the edge of the city. It didn't pay much, but it gave her peace. She taught children to paint, to color outside the lines, to turn their feelings into beauty. She'd always loved art, but it had taken motherhood to remind her how healing it could be. Every brushstroke felt like rebuilding, every canvas a reminder that life could be messy and still beautiful. She didn't think about Nick often, not in the way she used to. At first, she couldn't sleep without wondering if he would call. Then, slowly, she stopped waiting. Eventually, her thoughts of him dulled into a quiet ache, like a scar that had finally healed, but never forgot where the wound once was. What Emma didn't know was that across the city, in a different kind of world, Nick had changed. Not all at once, and not enough, but something had shifted. It started with a missed appointment, then 2. Then his assistant of 5 years quit without a warning. She left a letter on his desk that said, "You don't see people, only numbers." That letter haunted him more than he admitted. Nick still walked into boardrooms like he owned the air, still wore suits that cost more than some people made in a month. But sometimes late at night, when the city was quiet and success didn't echo quite as loud, he'd sit in his penthouse staring at the skyline, remembering a moment he never talked about, a moment when he walked out of an apartment and never looked back. He told himself she would call, that she'd reach out, that if it really mattered, she'd find him, but she never did. And as the years passed, the silence between them became too large to fill with excuses. One evening, Nick sat in his office long after the lights were off. A team photo from 5 years ago stared at him from the shelf. Everyone was smiling, except him. He hadn't smiled like that since her, that night, for the first time in a long while. He searched her name online. No social media, no LinkedIn, just a small mention buried in a community website. Emma Parker, art instructor at Sunrise Studio, hosting a children's painting class for local families. His fingers hovered over the mouse. He could click, he could go, he could find her, but he did in single quotes. Instead, he sat in the dark, staring at that name on the screen, heart tight with something he couldn't name. Meanwhile, across town, Emma was tucking Lily into bed. "Tell me a story, Mama," the little girl whispered, curling into her blanket. Emma smiled, brushing a curl from her daughter's forehead. "What kind of story?" "One with a princess, but not the kind that needs saving." Emma's chest tightened. "I think I can do that." And she did. She told her a story about a girl who found her strength not in castles or crowns, but in kindness and courage. and in the love she gave so freely even when it wasn't returned. Lily drifted off to sleep with a smile, but the world was about to change again. Because the next morning, Emma received a letter. No return address, no name, just a small envelope slipped into the studio's mailbox. Inside, a folded page and a check donation for the studio. Emma opened it with cautious fingers. The note read, "I don't expect forgiveness, but I never stopped wondering. I hope this helps Nick." Her breath caught. She stared at the name, the same way she had once stared at the pink lines, not angry, not afraid, just quiet. Because some ghosts don't knock before returning, and some stories don't end when you think they do. Asterisk. The envelope sat on her kitchen table for 2 days. Emma didn't touch it again. Not because she didn't believe it was real. She knew that handwriting too well. She had once traced those very letters with the tip of her finger in quiet Sunday mornings, back when everything felt new and untouched by time. But now, the sight of it filled her with a strange mix of stillness and weight. It didn't hurt. Not exactly. It just stirred something she had buried carefully, something she had worked so hard to live beyond. The check had no amount written that could undo the past, and she didn't want it to. Still, she couldn't deny what pulsed through her hands when she held it: uncertainty, curiosity, and the faintest glimmer of something she hated to name, closure, or the beginning of it. On the third morning, Lily was playing with her watercolor kit at the table, humming to herself while Emma poured her coffee. The little girl glanced up suddenly. "Mama, who's Nick?" Emma froze. The cup paused midair. "Where did you hear that name, sweetheart?" Lily shrugged in the casual way only a child could. "It was on the envelope, that white one." Emma blinked. "You looked at the envelope." "I was just pretending to mail it. I didn't open it." She added quickly, eyes wide. "But I saw the name." Emma sat across from her slowly, setting the cup down. "Nick is someone I used to know, a long time ago." "Is he a nice someone?" Emma opened her mouth to answer, but nothing came. How do you explain to a child that sometimes people are not all bad, or all good but lost somewhere in between? "He didn't know how to be kind then," she said carefully. "But maybe now, maybe he's trying." Lily nodded, accepting it with the simplicity only a child's heart could manage. Then she smiled. "Maybe he should take an art class." Emma laughed in spite of herself. Maybe he should. That afternoon, Emma walked the long way home from the studio. The wind had that early spring crispness, not yet warm but full of quiet promises. She walked past the park where she used to read during lunch breaks, past the bakery that still smelled like vanilla and burnt sugar, past memories tucked into corners of the city she had claimed as her own, without fully intending to. She found herself in front of a building she hadn't seen in for years. Nick's office tower stood like a glass monument against the sky, sleek, distant, untouched. She stared at it from across the street, her fingers tightening around the straps of her bag. She didn't go inside, didn't plan to, just stood there for a moment, watching, wondering. Somewhere inside that tower, the man she once loved might still be watching the world from behind boardroom glass, or maybe he, too, was staring at doors he never had the courage to walk back through. Back at his office, Nick was pacing. He had sent the letter on impulse. It wasn't planned. In fact, it was the first thing he had done in years that wasn't part of a strategy, just a raw, unfiltered choice, and now he was questioning it. She hadn't called. She hadn't written. Maybe she'd torn it up. Maybe she hated him. Maybe she had every reason to. He sat behind his desk and pulled out a drawer. From it, he lifted a small velvet box. It had never been opened. He had bought it that same week, 4 years ago. Back when he had suspected things might change. Back when his fear got the best of him and he ran before the truth could settle into his skin. Inside was a gold bracelet. Simple, engraved. It read, "For what's to come." He stared at it now, the words almost mocking. What had come, indeed? Silence, distance, regret. A soft knock on his door snapped him back. His assistant peeked in. "Sir, there's someone here asking for you. She doesn't have an appointment." He frowned. "Who?" The woman hesitated. She said her name is Emma Parker. Nick stood so fast his chair tipped back slightly. His chest felt tight. "Send her in." he said quickly, but when he turned toward the door, it wasn't her. It was someone else entirely, another client, another meeting. She hadn't come. She wasn't coming. He sat back down, almost dizzy with disappointment. For the first time in years, a meeting didn't matter. Emma, meanwhile, had walked away from the building and never looked back, not because she was angry, but because she was strong enough now to know forgiveness didn't need permission, and healing didn't always need an audience. Still, that night, after Lily was tucked into bed, Emma pulled out the journal again, the one she'd started during her pregnancy. She hadn't written in it in months, but now she found herself opening to a fresh page. You asked if Nick is a nice someone. I didn't know what to say then, but I do now. He wasn't ready to be someone's father. Maybe he's ready to try now. I don't know if he ever will, but I hope if you meet him one day you'll have your own answers. She closed the journal, ran her fingers across the soft leather cover, and smiled gently. Across the city, Nick sat alone in his office, holding a bracelet meant for a moment that never came. But life had a way of circling back, and sometimes the stories we thought had ended were only waiting for the next page. It began with a coincidence, or at least that's what Emma told herself. A community event flyer had arrived at the studio, a spring fundraiser hosted by the city's Children's Foundation. Family-friendly, free admission, booths, games, and art corners for kids. It sounded like something Lily would love. Emma signed them up without thinking twice. The morning of the event was bright and full of energy. Balloons bounced in the breeze. Kids ran around in face paint. Music played softly over the speakers. Emma held Lily's hand as they made their way toward the painting booth, where Emma had agreed to volunteer for a few hours. Lily was already tugging toward the coloring table, her little eyes wide with excitement. Can I paint now, Mama? Emma smiled. Yes, baby, go ahead. I'll be right here. She helped Lily settle in, then turned to unpack the supplies behind the booth. The smell of fresh paint, grass, and popcorn filled the air, and for a moment, everything felt light again. Simple. Until she heard a voice, not loud, not sharp, just familiar. A few feet away, someone was speaking with one of the event coordinators. She didn't catch the words, just the tone. Calm, reserved, intentional. And then she saw him. Nick. He looked different, not in the way time changes someone, but in the way life softens sharp edges you didn't think could change. His suit jacket was off, sleeves rolled up, and for the first time, Emma saw lines on his face that hadn't been there before. Tired ones, yes, but honest. Her instinct was to step back, to disappear into the crowd. But before she could move, his eyes met hers. He froze. It was only a second, maybe two, but in that heartbeat of silence, everything unsaid between them came rushing back. Emma didn't look away, neither did he. Nick took a slow step forward. Then, another. She stayed where she was. Finally, he stood in front of her, unsure, words piling behind his lips without order. He looked like someone holding a fragile thing, unsure whether to reach for it or let it go. Emma, he said softly, as if tasting the name for the first time in years. She nodded. Nick. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. The world around them carried on, children laughing, music playing, lives unfolding, but their small corner stood still. I didn't expect to see you here, he said. I didn't expect you to be here at all. He glanced toward the art tables. I donated to the event, one of my company's outreach projects. Emma raised an eyebrow. And you decided to actually show up this time. That made him smile quietly, genuinely, trying to be less of a ghost. She crossed her arms. Ghosts don't send anonymous checks. He met her eyes again. I didn't know how else to start. Emma didn't reply right away. Then she asked, what made you send it? Nick hesitated, then answered with a softness that surprised them both. You. I kept thinking about you. About the test. About walking away. I never stopped thinking about it. About you. About what I missed. Emma exhaled, her gaze drifting toward Lily, who was now laughing with two other kids at the table. Covered in paint and joy. She's for now, Emma said. Nick followed her eyes and froze. Lily. The little girl had his mouth, his posture, his quiet, observant way of looking at the world. It hit him all at once, like air rushing back into lungs. that hadn't breathed properly in years. He took a step toward the table, but Emma placed a hand gently on his arm. "She doesn't know you." "I know," he said quickly. "I'm not here to force anything. I wanted to know if she was okay, if you were." Emma studied him carefully. "We are. It wasn't easy, but we made it." Nick nodded slowly, struggling to find words that mattered. "I was scared," he admitted finally. "I thought if I ignored it, it would go away. I wasn't ready, and then I was ashamed. I didn't think I deserved to come back." "You didn't," she said plainly. "But here you are." His shoulders dropped slightly. "Is there any way I can make this right?" Emma didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked over to Lily and whispered something in her ear. The little girl looked up, curious, then stood and walked over slowly, paintbrush still in hand. "Lily," Emma said gently, "this is someone I used to know. His name is Nick." Lily tilted her head. "Hi." Nick knelt down slowly, careful not to scare her, eyes wide with emotion. "Hi, Lily," he said, voice cracking just a little. "It's really nice to meet you." Lily grinned. "Wanna see my painting?" "I'd love to," Nick whispered, not trusting himself to say more. Emma stood beside them, watching her daughter take Nick's hand and pull him toward the table. Something shifted inside her, deep, quiet, but undeniable. She wasn't sure where this would go, if it would hurt again, if trust could grow from something once broken. But in that moment, she didn't need the whole story written, just one new page. And that page was beginning, right here, in the middle of a spring afternoon, with sunlight on her face and hope small, unexpected blooming again. Lily asked if he liked butterflies. Nick blinked, caught off guard by the question. They were sitting side by side at the art table now, her small fingers dipping into bright pink paint as she spoke without pause. "Because I do. I really, really like them. Sometimes I dream I can fly like one. I think butterflies are amazing," Nick said softly, trying to keep his voice steady. "They go through a lot before they can fly." Lily nodded like she understood. "That's what Mama says too." Emma watched from a distance. She was helping other children with their art, but her eyes kept drifting back to the two of them, her daughter, chatting so naturally with a man who had once vanished without a single word. And that man, sitting with his sleeves rolled up, listening like the world had narrowed down to just one little girl and her imagination. Nick didn't try too hard. He didn't ask questions that would raise suspicion. He didn't press for connection. He simply listened, and in doing so, earned more than he realized. When the event wrapped up and the cleanup began, Lily clutched her painting tightly. "Can he come with us?" she asked Emma innocently. Emma knelt beside her daughter. "Sweetheart, he has work today." Nick opened his mouth to protest, but Emma gave him a look. "Not yet." Lily pouted but accepted it with a sigh. "Okay, maybe next time, maybe," Emma said gently. Nick crouched down to her level and looked into Lily's eyes, searching for the right words. "I'd like that," he said. "If it's okay with your mom." Lily smiled. "I think it will be." They parted ways outside the event gates. Emma didn't offer her number, and Nick didn't ask. But there was something exchanged anyway, something unspoken. An invisible door left ajar. The next week, a small package arrived at the studio. Inside was a blank canvas, a child's art set, and a note that simply said, "For Lily's dreams, if she still wants to fly." And Emma stood there holding the box for a long time, heart torn between the past and a future she didn't know how to define. She didn't reply, but she kept the box. It was weeks before they saw him again unexpectedly, this time at the public library, where Emma had taken Lily for story hour. He was there with a donation team, organizing book drives, when Lily spotted him. She lit up and ran toward him before Emma could stop her. "Nick, I read a book about butterflies." He turned, his whole face softening. "You did? That's amazing." Emma approached slower, cautious. She didn't want to start something Lily couldn't understand, something fragile that might break before it could mean anything real. But Nick didn't try to explain his presence or impose himself. Instead, he handed Lily a gently used book from the donation bin, a story about a girl who saved a caterpillar and waited patiently for it to become something beautiful. Emma watched the exchange and felt something strange stirring in her, regret, was still there, yes, but it was starting to lose its grip. After story hour, Nick walked with them to their car. Just a short walk. No expectations. Just a quiet exchange of moments they never thought they'd share. Before they left, Nick turned to Emma. I don't expect anything. I know what I lost. But if there's ever a day you need someone, or if Lily ever needs someone, I'm not going to disappear again. Emma nodded once, slowly. I don't know what this is yet. You don't have to know, he replied. I'll wait, even if it's just to be in her life a little. I'll wait. They drove home in silence, Lily reading her new book in the back seat. Emma glanced at her through the mirror, then at the road ahead. That night, she opened the journal again. He met you today at the library. You smiled like you'd known him forever, and for a second, I saw something in his face I'd never seen before. Not guilt, not fear, but hope, real hope. I don't know where this leads, but you deserve every chapter, even the ones that surprise us. And across the city, Nick sat alone in his apartment. He had been quiet for years, working, building, chasing things that couldn't fill the silence inside him. But today had been different. Today, a little girl looked at him like he mattered. And, for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like a mistake. He felt human again. He took out the bracelet from that velvet box, still unopened, still gleaming. He ran his thumb over the engraving. For what's to come, he was finally ready to find out. The rain came softly that morning, painting the windows with thin streaks, like the sky itself was deep in thought. Emma sat at the edge of the bed, watching Lily sleep curled under the covers, one hand resting above her head in a way she'd done since infancy. The world was quiet, just the hush of early hours and the gentle tap of rain. She reached for the journal again, the same one she'd written in through her pregnancy, through sleepless nights, through each small milestone, pages filled with whispered hopes and uncertain prayers. It had been her sanctuary when the world felt too big and her heart felt too small. But this morning, as she flipped through its worn pages, she realized something had changed. The pain wasn't as sharp. The silence she once carried didn't echo the way it used to. It wasn't that everything was healed. Some things, she knew, never fully would be. But where there had once been a wound, there was now a scar. And where there had once been fear, there was space for choice, for softness, for maybe. The doorbell rang. She glanced at the clock. Just past 8 a.m. Too early for deliveries. Too early for visitors. Lily stirred but didn't wake. Emma walked quietly to the door and opened it. Nick stood in the rain, holding an umbrella in one hand and a small paper bag in the other. His hair was damp around the edges, suit jacket darkened by the drizzle. But he didn't look hurried or rehearsed. He looked real. I brought muffins, he said, lifting the bag a little. And, honesty. Emma leaned against the doorframe. Both things I've been short on lately. He smiled gently. Can I come in? She hesitated only a moment before stepping aside. He entered like someone stepping into a place they'd only ever imagined, not with confidence, but with quiet reverence. The home was small, lived in, warm, crayon drawings on the fridge, a worn stuffed bunny on the couch, dishes drying by the sink. He breathed in the scent of cinnamon and something sweet baking from earlier. It wasn't grand, but it was more than he'd ever had in any penthouse. Emma poured coffee. They sat at the kitchen table, steam curling between them, both unsure of where to start. I've been thinking, Nick said, hands wrapped around the cup, about that day, the day I left. She didn't speak, just let him say the words. I thought I was protecting you from me. I thought I wasn't ready. I told myself I couldn't be a father, but really I just didn't want to face what it meant to care more about someone else than myself. Emma's voice was soft when she finally replied, and now, I care, more than I ever thought I could. They sat in silence for a long time. Then he reached into his coat pocket and gently placed the small velvet box between them. She looked down at it, not touching. I bought this for years ago. I was going to give it to you that night. I kept it, even when I didn't understand why. I guess part of me always hoped, even if I didn't know how to say it. She opened the box. Inside was the bracelet. Simple, gold, elegant, for what's to come. Emma blinked fast, her fingers trembling. Slightly. It doesn't mean anything unless you want it to, Nick said quickly. It's not a promise, not yet. Just a start. Footsteps padded down the hallway. Lily appeared, rubbing her eyes. Her pajama top was slightly crooked, her hair messy in the back, and her stuffed bunny dragging along the floor. When she saw Nick, she lit up. "You came back," she said. Matter-of-factly. Nick stood, unsure what to say. "I did," he said finally. "Good," she said, walking over to the table. "Because I saved you the last muffin. It's banana." Nick looked at Emma. She nodded once. He sat beside Lily, unwrapped the muffin, and took a small bite. "It's perfect." Lily grinned. Emma watched them, her daughter, and the man who had once left without a word. And for the first time, she didn't see what was missing. She saw what had grown, what could still grow. Later that afternoon, they went to the park. Lily ran ahead, chasing birds and laughing. The bracelet now round her tiny wrist instead of Emma's. She wanted to wear it. Emma said with a smile, "Said it feels like magic." "Maybe it is," Nick replied, watching her run. Emma glanced sideways at him. "This doesn't mean everything is fixed." "I know," he said. "It doesn't mean you can undo for years." "I wouldn't try to," he said. "But maybe I can earn something new." She looked at him for a long moment. "You'll need patience," she said. "I have for years of it saved up," he replied quietly. And for the first time in a very long time, Emma didn't feel like she was walking this path alone. There were no guarantees, no promises, but there was presence. There was trying. And sometimes that was more than enough to begin again. As the sun began to set behind the trees and Lily chased butterflies in the golden light, Nick reached for Emma's hand. She didn't pull away. She let him hold it, not because the past was gone, but because they were both still here and something beautiful was just beginning.